Welcome to Chasing Hard podcast, where we talk about trusting God when life doesn't turn out the way you planned. If you've been around for any amount of time, then you have probably come face to face with at least one thing that didn't go quite like you had envisioned, like you had planned, like you had prayed for. And as a believer, you have to figure out what to do when that happens in your life. Like, how do you reconcile that with your faith in God? You may have spent time in the Word and prayed the prayers, believing for a certain thing, and maybe it didn't turn out like you thought it would turn out. What do you do with your faith? What do you do with your relationship with God? We talk about those things a lot here, but we also talk about some fun and easy things. And I'm not sure what Violet and I are going to talk about today, but Violet, I welcome you to a podcast.
Thank you so much, Lori, for having me. And as I hear you introduce, the podcast, I'm like, where was this when I needed it back then?
Well, that must mean that you have some situations in your life that didn't go quite the way you planned.
Yeah, if you know my story, I'm a suicide survivor.
Okay.
And the reason that happened was because, first off, I was molested by my great uncle, and then I was gang raped when I was a teenager. And all this right after because I got saved when I was about 8 years old. An
Mm.
evangelist came to our little town of Laredo, Texas. Little town back then. Now it's,
Right.
blowing up.
Right.
But yeah, thank God for him because my mom and I both went up. My mom went up and I was feeling like, yes, this is what I want. I want
Right.
Jesus. And the abundant life, I didn't know those terms back then when I was
Sure.
8 years old, but it's like, yes, I want to feel God near me and I want to give my life to Jesus. But these things happened and then I didn't know how to deal with them.
Mm-hmm.
And just that pain, it was like pain over pain. And like you were saying, if we don't know how to trust God through the situation, if we don't know how to approach the situation or just go through those emotions, then the pain just piled
Right.
up. And there was all these questions in my mind, like, God, do you really love me? God, are you really there?
Sure.
God, are you punishing me? And, after that, I'm like, I'm just done with here. All the preachers say
Right.
that in
Right.
heaven, there's going to be no dying, no crying. That's what I want. So let me
Yes.
just, skip to the good
Yeah.
part. But thankfully, it was my husband that he was in the military back then. Now he retired from the military. But when you're in the military, you have to be working as long as they want you there. But he heard prompting from Holy Spirit. So you see
Cool.
God working behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And
So I can relate to parts of your story. I too am a survivor of a suicide attempt, but also was sexually abused when I was young. And I don't want to minimize it. I mean, it wasn't a a relative family member that did it habitually. It wasn't a gang rape, which is horrifying. It was in sixth grade. There were some boys in my class, and I wasn't the only victim, but they would grab and inappropriately touch us during in a hallway full of people or at recess or wherever. And I wanted to be invisible. I didn't necessarily at that time want to die, but I wanted to be invisible and I did not want to go to school. So I would fabricate reasons not to go to school. And I never told anyone. And I'm wondering, since you mentioned your husband, did you ever tell anyone as a child what was going on?
not as a child, but when I was 18 years old, that's when, you know, I was just struggling so much and I needed prayer because I also had health issues
Hmm.
that came alongside, all that emotional turmoil.
Sure.
And I finally, just told my parents what happened and they loved me and embraced me. And I was like,
Wow.
I wish I would have told them a long time ago. But for some reason, I just kept it to myself that whole
Were
time.
you threatened by your uncle in any
No,
way?
actually, the second time that he was trying to do his thing, I said, "Why are you doing this?" And he
Hmm.
got mad and he said, "Oh, I thought you liked it." And
Okay.
so since then, also, I've been afraid that everybody's mad at me. Um, But thank God that God gave me the boldness to
Good.
say something, and that stopped.
That's good. So I know there are lots of women who have been sexually abused on a smaller scale or a great scale that haven't talked about it for whatever reason. You know, they may have been threatened. I had a friend whose teacher abused him actually and threatened to kill his sister, to kill his other siblings, to kill his parents. And as a child, this is an authority figure and you believe them. And so you want to protect the people that you love. So often that's the reason why we don't talk about the things that happen to us. But for whatever reason, to whoever's listening that hasn't talked about it, there is such release and such freedom just to allow yourself to tell somebody. Like it doesn't have to be a counselor or a pastoral figure, but just to get it outside of you, because if you keep it inside of you, it does cause health problems as well as emotional issues and hard to maintain relationships when you're carrying around that load.
And it's really strange because I also feel sorry for the person that did it, and I don't want them to get in trouble.
Ah, I mean, that makes sense because we love a lot of times it's a family member and you love that person. It makes sense. And isn't that even as a young child, the heart of Jesus, like his compassion to those who are struggling? Because obviously, an adult person or even a minor person who who does those types of things has some issues, has some hurts inside of them
Oh,
because
yeah.
hurting people hurt people, as they say. So I like that. I can tell. I don't know you really well. We met a few years ago online at something, and what little I do know of you, I know that you have a compassionate heart, and so it looks like I can see you as that little 8-year-old girl who didn't want to hurt someone and want them to get in trouble, even though they were hurting you.
Yeah. And just like you said, God just keeps showing up and keeps showing up behind the scenes. So even though we don't see him working, he is working.
Yeah, for sure. So oftentimes, God uses the things that we go through as to give us to like a platform, like us. He uses the hard things to help allow us to help others. He uses our pain to touch other people's lives. I feel like that. I don't know what you've been doing in the last few years. I feel like that's part of your story and part of what you do.
Well, it is my belief that God can use anything. God
Yes.
uses our strengths, God uses
Mhm.
our triumphs, and God, like our mentor says, Pedro, that God doesn't waste anything. So even in our pains, God didn't cause these pains. This was not his ideal plan, but he always redeems
Right.
everything and he can use it for good. Romans 8:28.
Mhm. That's good. So you and your husband, I know, I've seen you online together. What's that about? What are you doing together?
Um, well, right now we're going over Proverbs. God had told my husband to actually do a Proverbs challenge himself, even though our mentor is doing one, but my husband didn't know that at the time. And now that we're doing our mentors challenge, my husband said, I want to make sure to read Proverbs on my own so that I can
Oh,
understand it. Because when you're in a place where somebody else is reading it or they're cutting things off, or sometimes they don't
yeah,
read the whole chapter.
yeah.
So he wanted to make sure to ingest it all and digest it. Um, so he said, I'm going to be reading it prior to going on the our mentors challenge. And I said, well, why don't we read it with
Ah,
our community? And that's what we've been doing since
that's so
January.
cool. That's cool. I know a lot of people do start off the year with the Proverbs challenge. I've done that a few times myself. So tell me about your community. What's this community that you have?
This one in particular, because we've tried different things
Hmm.
throughout the years, entrepreneurial wise. It's called the Thriving Kingdompreneur Group,
Okay.
and just trying to share things that God revealed to me so that people can thrive, so that people know that Jesus died a gruesome
Mm.
death for us to live the abundant life. We don't have to wait till heaven,
Right.
but like David said, we'll see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And I see a lot of people, a lot of believers that are living, you know, disgusted, they're living broke, busted, and I want them, to be able to know, hey, this is my inheritance as the
Mm,
son and daughter of God, and actually appropriate it so that we can shine that light and then we can be able to help others who are really truly lost, the
wow,
pre-believers out there.
that's good. Also, I think you wrote a book?
Yes, I actually wrote two books.
2 books.
The
Wow.
last one, I wrote it the fun, free, fast way. It was so easy. It was a breeze. All these people complain, it's like birthing a child, which I don't know what that feels like because my husband and I, even though we've been married 28 years, we're kid free.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I have a workshop and I'm like, hey, if you want to know how to do it the fun, free, fast way, let me know because I would
S-
love to share that.
Wow. So the fun, free, fast way to do what?
To publish your book,
Oh, is that what you're okay?
that's how I published
Wow,
mine.
that's
Yeah.
how. So I guess you're an indie publisher. You published your book on your own.
That one I did. The first one I actually did through a publishing company and paid $8,000 to be on the cover with Brian Tracy.
Oh, wow, cool. What was that book?
The first one is called Ready, Set, Go, and my
Which I think I see it in
chapter,
the background there.
yeah,
Are
it's
those
right
both of your
there.
books?
Yes, those are
Okay.
both of my books.
Okay.
And it was about enjoying your life now. Don't be, just like me, I was struggling in pity parties and prodigal daughter stories back and forth. It's like, no, I can enjoy my life now,
Uh-huh.
even though I have not reached, the pinnacle of the ideal of what God wants for me in this life. I can still have an amazing life, and I do now. Before,
Right.
I hated myself, I hated my life. Now, I love my life.
Yeah.
And my husband says, you're one of the most blessed women in the whole world, Violet.
Ah, that's so cool. Because here's the thing about life. As I get older, I learn a lot of things about life, and especially when I go through hard things. Um, it's not really about what happens to us, but how we respond. And, it seems like some people's lives are easy breezy, right? Like what you see online or even what you see in real life. It just seems like they don't have a lot of struggles. But I've come to know that you only know what they want you to know about their lives. And it seems like some people, it's just one thing after another. It's ridiculous. It's the trauma and this happened and then this happened and they never get to that place where life seems like even keel and they can be content. But what I've learned, and it took me a while to wrestle and struggle and grieve the things that I have gone through in my life, that you can find contentment, that you can find joy in your life because of how you respond to the situations. So it's it's really not about the things that happen to us. And just to look at the smile on your face, like that's a testament to that it doesn't you went through some horrendous things. Um, but you don't have to stay there. You don't have to live there.
Yeah, there is freedom, there is breakthrough. And one of the things that my husband and I experienced when the pandemic was going on, all these people were suffering because they were
Mm,
seeing the wrong thing. They got their eyes off of Jesus. And we went online and we started encouraging people.
mm,
We're like, hey, remember our God, remember who we are. Go out there, get some sun, go on hikes. We were traveling that whole time. And I believe God kept us in Goshen because we made
mm,
him the center of our lives, not the problem the center of our lives.
right.
And since then, just great things and favor have been happening to us because we've been living, knowing our position in Christ and also living out of victory, declaring his promises, renewing our minds. We were reading Proverbs yesterday, Proverbs 23:7, that as a man or woman thinks in their
Mhm.
heart, so are they.
Yeah.
And just that's one of the things that broke me free is knowing our identity, standing on our identity, believing God for good things, not not agreeing with things that, like you said, even though there's circumstances like a hurricane, like, a
Mhm.
worldwide plague. But when we stand on the promises of God and we continue to declare them and say, hey, we used to say, when people would declare negative things. Hey, not in this house. Just take a stand against those things. And God has just been blessing us and
Mhm.
bringing us into just a wonderful, enjoyable life.
Yeah, so many things have crossed my mind as you were speaking. But just the last thing that you said, because I was raised in a home that put a lot of emphasis on the words that you speak out of your mouth. And I believe that's true. I believe that being created in the image of God, part of that is he's given us the power of words. And I think those things that you talk about come about. And another thing that we get to choose is how we react and respond in the things that we say when we are in situations. And that's not a license to stay in denial, to deny the things that happen to you, to deny that you're going through a hard time. I mean, it's to accept and then choose. And I make
Right.
it sound easy. That's not an easy
Exactly.
thing at all. And I think it's harder for some people than others. And I know for me, there was a grief period, and I think grief is God given that we there is a time to grieve and mourn, and to intentionally grieve was what I had to do. I think to get past a lot of the traumas that I had experienced in my life, and it's hard. It's hard work to grieve. It's hard to sit with the emotions. And it's not like you have to do it 24/7. It's just when the things that trigger the triggers that we experience and it brings up the old things, just to acknowledge them. And if you haven't properly grieved them, to allow the time just to feel that loss, no matter if it's the loss of a person or a dream that you hoped for. And that's what we talk about a lot here is when life doesn't turn out the way you plan, that's a loss. When life doesn't turn out the way you plan is a grief situation. Like you have to take time to acknowledge and grieve that. I think we as a society these days don't know the importance of grieving and how to grieve.
Well, for me, a better, I guess for me personally, because I
Yeah.
guess for some people it might be good to grieve and all that, but for me, counseling didn't work for me.
Okay.
So, like the Bible says, cast those imaginations down. That's what works for me. For me, when a thought comes up, I reject it or I take authority. Like actually, right before I came on this podcast, I was thinking of how I lost my wedding ring.
Ah,
Uh, but I'm reminded, hey, I chose health because we were staying with my in-laws at that time. And we had to get out of the house because there were things there that were affecting my health. And if I would have gone back and checked for my rings, then that would have put me in a, situation where I could have harmed my body. So
mm-hmm.
what I said was I changed it. I said, well, I made a right decision. And I guess it was worth it to lose my rings because I gained my health.
That's good.
And it's interesting because there's neural pathways. My brain, I grew up with depression. I had over 20 suicide attempts.
That's a lot.
And because my brain was used to going to the negative or what I call the unresourceful, but I learned to instead of keep going toward the negative, keep, nursing my wounds and all that, keep
Mm-hmm.
repeating those things over and over again that happened to me that weren't fair, that God didn't want to happen. Those kept me trapped and
Yeah.
those kept me, you know, in a state where I wasn't thriving. But when I decided to, oh, let's renew our mind. How could we look at that
Mm-hmm.
differently? What do I actually want to stand on? What do I actually want to think on? And what is the actual truth that God is telling me? I noticed that I ended up in those grieving moments less and less time,
Yeah.
which had me more time. And also one thing that you said earlier is huge that I haven't touched on yet is joy,
Yeah.
being able to feel joy, the joy of the Lord, because even it's a commandment. God says, rejoice, rejoice. Again, I say rejoice. And strengthening that joy muscle has really also helped me to just redirect my
Right.
thoughts And when you redirect your thoughts, you redirect your
Right.
life.
And on the topic of joy, like I think a lot of people get that confused with happiness. And that's not what joy is. Like it's not happiness isn't one of the fruits of the spirit. Joy is. And so we get that confused and think that life because happiness tends to depend on circumstances. And joy doesn't. Joy is like what you find in spite of the circumstances, which, and the joy of the Lord is our strength for sure. And there's always something to be joyful for.
Yeah, in the presence of God is fullness of joy.
Yeah.
So as long as you're connected to the Lord, and
Yeah.
even pre-believers, God put four happy hormones inside of them, which is dopamine,
It's
oxytocin,
true.
serotonin, and endorphins.
Yeah.
And we always have access to that.
Hmm.
And us as believers, we have the fruit of the Spirit. It's like
Yep.
love, joy, peace. It was there all along.
Yeah. Also, there's something that you said about suicide because the 20 attempts is a lot of attempts. I think, well, I know that suicide is a spiritual issue. And that when we entertain the thoughts of suicide and even attempt, that opens a door to, I mean, obviously it's an evil thing to want to harm your body, to kill yourself is an evil thing. And it's not of God. So it's of his, the enemy of our souls. And I think that once we entertain those things or even attempt, it opens a door that's kind of hard to close. Like I think once I just remember for me that out of nowhere the thought would come after I'd already gone, already healed from it. My attempt was unsuccessful, even though I still didn't want to be here. It was unsuccessful, so that was a good thing. But there were random times when I wasn't even thinking about anything that the thought would just pop into my head. You can just kill yourself. That's not of God, and that's not necessarily just your human thinking. We have an enemy, the enemy of our soul, and who is comes to kill, steal, and to destroy. And I think suicide is a far more spiritual thing than we realize.
Yeah, and the Bible says that God has given us authority over the power, all the power of the enemy. So he doesn't really have any power unless we give it to him. So when we agree, and whenever those thoughts come in our head, it's like just reject them. And
Hmm.
those thoughts, it's been over 10 years, maybe 12 years now that I don't even take prescription antidepressants anymore because I was
Hmm.
on everything. The doctor
Yeah.
put me on, tried everything on me and it didn't work. I just flushed them down the toilet because they had no effect. Um, but, you know, just standing on that authority and knowing that, hey, it's just like I forgot who it was, Wigglesworth, I think it was, that the Satan showed up to him right on the edge of his bed, and he woke up and he said, "Oh, it's just you," and he went back to bed. Like, don't
Right.
give the enemy any room at the table. I think Bill
Right.
Johnson says, focusing on Jesus, focusing on,
Yeah.
you know, just being in total awe of God and His goodness and His unconditional love is, yeah.
And I want to just speak a little bit to the listeners who may feel a little intimidated by because they might not feel as spiritual as you are. It's not wrong to take meds if you need meds temporarily. I mean, those things aren't wrong. I mean, I think that God will lead each individual down the path that they need to go down. For me, I did go through a lot of counseling. Some of it was useful, some of it wasn't. I did EMDR, which is, I don't know if you've heard of it, but it has to do with
Yeah.
eye. That was a game changer for me. It
Oh,
it
yeah.
it
Oh.
helped me to the trigger. I wasn't triggered anymore. And so my therapist was a Christian, and so she invited Jesus into those sessions that I had, and it was amazing. So it's not, if you're not where Violet is in your walk and can't just take every thought captive that to the obedience of Christ, it's not wrong. God has you on a journey for you. Like your journey is your journey, and God will use your journey however He needs to bring you to the place where you need to be. And if that's taking meds and it's working for you, good for you. As you grow in your faith and your relationship with Jesus, there's no condemnation in doing what you have to do to get to heal and to get well. I just wanted to
Yeah.
land on that, but I also want to give you just here a little time to speak to the person who is struggling and who wants to be able to take the thoughts captive that come randomly into their heads, or whatever it is that you want to say to the listeners.
There's so many things I want to tell
Yeah,
them.
yeah. We have a little time.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Well, another thing that I think the first thing that helped me to break free from all this spiritual confusion or whatever turmoil I was in was I was sitting on a couch about to go into a pity party, like, woe is me, and and then start spiraling down. When you focus on it, it can start spiraling
Mhm.
down, into some place of no return. But God arrested me, and He's just like, Violet, do you know that I love you unconditionally? Whether you lift a pinky finger, whether you do what I tell you to do, or whether you don't do anything at all, you know, do or don't do. I love you fully and unconditionally. And I love how my
Mm.
pastor says that he sees us like and grabs us by our little cheeks and this is my son or daughter. And I'm so
Ah,
proud of you. No matter
yeah,
what
right.
stage of your Christian walk and Christian journey you're at, he's so proud of you. He's rejoicing over us with singing every day.
Mhm.
And his mercies are new every morning.
Amen.
So just go to him and let him hold you in his precious arms. One of the things that I used to do is I didn't wrap myself, but one of my coaches, she actually would wrap herself really tight, like, how babies are in
Hmm.
swaddling clothes,
Hmm.
and then just listen and soak in
Oh,
worship
wow.
music and feel the love of the Father just loving on you, loving on you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
his
I like that she
unconditional
did
love.
that tangible physical thing of wrapping herself because, God created us and we have that desire to be wrapped and swaddled. Um,
Mm,
First of all, I think by our parents and his love through our parents. And so, yeah, I like that she combined those things. That's really cool.
yes.
So where can people find your books?
My books, they're on
Okay.
Amazon. Yeah. The first one's Ready, Set, Go with Brian Tracy. The second one is 52 Ways to Do Business and Life in Joy. Because
Mm,
as God just brought a whole torrential rain of joy strategies that I've been implementing,
that's good.
which,
I
yeah,
like it.
and
Joy strategies. That's good. Being
yeah.
strategic about joy. I like it. And
Yes.
so where can they find you online and doing the things that you're doing? And what are you doing besides the Proverbs 31 days?
I'm doing several things, but I think being a certified prophetic trainer now, I'm actually doing workshops to activate people into recognizing the voice of the Lord with their different senses. Some people say, I'm a
Mhm.
seer or I'm a feeler. Well, Jesus was everything,
Right.
so we can be everything.
Wow.
And
That's
that's
cool.
just, yeah, it's amazing.
Because we have them
Uh,
all. We all have all the senses, so that's good. I
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also how to respond to those things and use it either as an evangelism tool or, to encourage each other, even in the church, people prophesying over each other, being a culture of that. So that's one of the things that I'm working on. And my website is violetdtree.com or on Instagram, violet_Dtree.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks so much for starting because I know we're on different time zones, so this is kind of early for you. So thanks for starting the day early with us here and for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's been great. And thank you, listener, for joining us today. I will be back next week. I hope you are too.